Okay, we're gonna get started. Find those seats. All right, so next up on the agenda, so this is bringing us another perspective from C-Suite is Kathleen Long. She is the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer at RepairPal. And RepairPal is a San Francisco-based company focused on helping families find auto repair that they can trust. So RepairPal's teams support over 3,700 independent auto repair shops and franchise dealers, helping them grow their businesses and connecting them with customers like, with partners like USAA and CarMax, who know that their customers will get high quality repairs at a fair price. And I did not memorize that, I am reading it, and I do work there, so if you're wondering, yes, that's me. And Kathleen is proud to stand for ethical principles and to be a female executive in a male-dominated industry. She was honored as Women in Auto Care's Woman of Excellence in 2022. And she's also been honored by Babcock's Media as a member of the 2023 class of the AMN Women at the Wheel or of the Wheel? At the Wheel. Yes, thank you.
Not of the wheel. That
yeah,
would be something else.
I started to say of, and I'm not reading it right. So please join me in welcoming Kathleen Long.
Thank you, Sheila.
Switch over on its own, right?
All right, so I didn't want y'all to think I didn't understand the assignment, and I love me a good costume change, right? So today I'm going to talk to you a bit about how to build an award-winning marketing team, because the team that Sheila and Jacob are both a part of is in fact an award-winning team, which I'm really proud of. I'll talk to you a little about me, a little bit about behind the scenes, and I hope what you get from it, regardless of whatever your current quote-unquote level is how to be a member of an award-winning team, how to think about building your career, how to get to where's next, no matter where you sit. And I'm here to tell you now, like, the difference between you and a C-suite executive is absolutely nothing. So that was the thing that I think very early on in my career, I was like, oh, I gotta figure this out, right? Like, these people are all so special and shiny, and there's something different about them, and I don't know what it is, and how can you crack the code and all of these other things. They're not, they're broken, they're dysfunctional, they're messed up, they have human problems, they do their best, well, the good ones do, right? There isn't any difference. So when you think about like what's possible for you in your career, if you take nothing else away from what I have to say, I would love it if you took away that whatever you want to do for yourself is actually possible for you. So hopefully I'll share some insights with you that get you a little closer. So when you think about a leadership journey, it starts with you. Like, and spoiler alert, it also kind of ends with you, and you'll see, we'll come back to that in the end, right? But it starts with you. And you have to think about like who you are, what you stand for, what it is that you really want to accomplish. Why are you doing that? You know, figuring out your why. Simon Sinek can help you with that if you have never sort of done an exploration of that before. But you have to have a reason. Like, I'm a chief revenue officer, so people must, you know, think, oh, she loves money, she wants to make money. I do enjoy the challenge of the competition. I really do. I am a competitive person. And that eureka moment when you get that contract signed, like, it doesn't suck, right? But the real reason why I'm a chief revenue officer is because if you build teams and you build systems around strategies that are good and that work and that are ethical and that help people move forward, the money will fall out of the bottom. So I have to still be able to speak to it and say, here's my numbers, and here's what we did do, and here's what we didn't do, and all this other stuff. But I don't spend every day perseverating over that. Instead, I think about the people, and what are we doing there, and are the systems and processes that support the people, are they working? and what are the changes, and how do we get the people across to embrace those changes. And ultimately, if we've made good decisions and we have good strategies, then because the people are solid, like I said, the money falls out the bottom. It's really kind of cool. And then there's the how you're going to go about it, right? So I'll give you a little bit of background on me, right? So I'm not just a C-level executive in a sparkly dress, although I don't mind being the C-level executive in a sparkly dress. I'm a lot of things. My dad is an automotive mechanic back in the day. He eventually went to work for Boeing. He's now in his 80s and retired. But when I was really small, I always thought, like, automotive is not for me, right? There's no way. He's dragging me around to these shops and talking for hours and going to the parts stores and agonizing over this thing versus that thing. And I was just like, can I read a book now or like do something else? So I thought it was incredibly boring. Half the time there were like, half naked calendars on the wall, and he'd put his hands over my eyes so I wouldn't see, these things. And so it just really didn't feel like a space that was for me. And I fell backwards into automotive about 10 years ago. I had a job in fintech before that, worked for Bill.com, payroll companies before that. That's also an industry that says once people join, they never leave. And I'm like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna find something else to do. I'm gonna flout authority, right? I'd done that for almost 20 years. It was good to me. But I had a very emotional experience in leaving my last company, and where the CEO who I'd worked with over successive companies, he kind of decided he wanted to skyrocket the company, and he didn't think I was the person to take like the rocket ship from the planet we were on, all the way into outer space. I disagreed, so he found a different role for me, but I ended up leaving the company because I didn't agree with him about my limits and what my capabilities were. So, and I knew that I could do it because I built my career from a frontline call center rep to an exec in 10 years. And then it took me about another 10 years to hit the C-suite. So, and that's because leadership, especially when you fully embrace it at the executive level, is a journey. And it takes longer to get to the next stage, like once you start really getting into, what leadership means. But, obviously I do public speaking. I'm also a mom. My son is 25. I have a former stepson. You divorce people, not kids. So he's still my kid. And then I have dogs. And so they get all of my maternal energy these days. I love hiking. I've taken up running. I spend a lot of time with my friends, like doing, theater and all these other pursuits. So at the end of the day, hopefully I'm a fully fledged human being. So somebody gave me a compliment. And I think, Sheila talked earlier about how hard it is for some people to receive compliments. And maybe it's hard for you because you think, I don't really deserve that. And I think one alternate perspective that you can have on that is, how can I be worthy of that compliment? So someone recently gave me a compliment that I want to work every day to be worthy of. And he said, he's like, I love watching you live your life. He's like, you are the person that life was made for. Okay, so first of all, I'm like, what? Because nobody's ever said anything like that to me before. And this was one of my former employees. And so it feels really good because that's what I want to do. And I want to build a legacy, and I want to build a legacy around what I'm doing for other people and how I'm showing up in the world. So what's not on this board is I spend an awful lot of time as well doing, various nonprofit and volunteer pursuits. So there is no sort of work-life line for me. Work is life, life is work. So I look at it all one and the same. Even when I'm having fun, I'm working hard at doing that, right? So for me, it's just kind of a blend, and sometimes I spend more time in one spot than another. But that's how I've thought about it. So when I think about building a team, the first thing first is like, you got to make sure that what you are wanting to attract someone to do is actually a good job. Like, what does the container for that look like? So, Harvard Business Review, because we trust things that come out of Harvard because they're really smart people, right? Meantime, I went to a nothing college, University of Nevada, Reno, and I graduated with a degree in philosophy, which has nothing to do with anything except for, helping you to think about things, which is something I probably spend too much time doing. But I loved it as a pure intellectual pursuit. It was great. And I wouldn't go back and change it with anything else for the world, right? So, but Harvard, a better college than the one I went to. Although Colin Kaepernick went to UNR, just want to point that out, and he is very cute and a good football player. Okay, so a good job is one where you feel seen for being the best version of yourself. You sense your colleagues have your back, you don't feel discriminated against based on your gender, race, or sexual orientation, you feel your position secure, and you have confidence you'll get help navigating constant changes in the working world. So, if you want a job that meets these criteria, make sure you're a part of a team with a leader you trust. The likelihood that you will actively look for a new job increases dramatically if you're lacking either your team or that trust in your leader. And those two things are one and the same. Team and leadership to me are the same thing. So then, once you have built what you think is a good container, a culture container, if you will, that has that safety in it, you got to think about what you really need. I was talking at my table earlier about this, actually. They brought it up like they knew I was going to talk about it. Many candidates will not apply for a job if they don't meet 100% of the criteria. Those many candidates tend to be women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people who feel in some way like they're an only or an other or whatever. It takes more for them to step up and to come into the room and to do all of that. And it's really, really hard for them to do that if they feel like they're not meeting 30 to 40% of the criteria that you put out there. Many men, and again, men aren't monolithic, I get that, but many men don't have that problem. They're like, oh, I got most of this stuff. Who cares about those other 3 things? They probably don't need it anyway. It's fine. I meet 60 to 70% of the criteria. I'm going to go ahead and apply. So when you're looking to create diversity of thought in your teams, and when you're looking to really make sure you include people, and that you're finding people for your team that are going to make sense. Make sure that you're only listing things that you need for that job description. If it's a nice to have, I see so many that say nice to have or bonus points, and just cut it off. All that can go in the garbage. People are always going to have bonus things. You hire them and then you're like, oh my God, they can do what? Right? People are full of bonuses, so you don't need to put them on your job description. And we're going to talk more about this, of course, but teams are more important than individuals. So you also want to tune in to what is going to make this team better or more robust. And it's not necessarily people just like the other ones that you hired. It's possibly somebody with a dissenting opinion. So like, what do I know about myself as a leader? First of all, I am loud. Like, are you getting that? I have
a microphone there if you need it.
I'm pretty sure they can hear me back at home, right in Denver right now. But yeah, I'm loud, and I have a forceful, assertive, maybe on some days aggressive personality, right? And I own that, and that's fine. I have a big personality, fills the room, all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of great stuff about that, and there's a lot of downsides about that. The downsides about that is, once I get into my element and I feel like I know what I know, and I come forward with my opinions, that can make it a little rough sometimes for other people to have a differing opinion. So as a leader, I have to look for people who are going to disagree with me. Because if I don't get those disagreements or those other perspectives, and I don't integrate them, then it's only as good as what I think, which some of the time is going to be good. I've made some good decisions in my career, or I wouldn't be here. But some of the time it stinks. And sometimes I know that there were people that were like, oh my God, she's doing what? And they don't want to tell me. So, and there's other things that I can do with my behavior that help to, turn the volume down just a little bit, right? To make that a thing. But I do have to look for people who have the characteristics that are going to fit into the team. And by fit in, I mean the things or perspectives that we're not getting, because we want to represent those. Okay, so again, just gonna quote smart people. So this is part of being the C-suite, by the way, is you just borrow with impunity from everybody, including your team members, including other smart people who've done things. So has anybody heard of this before, Project Aristotle? Cool. Okay. Sometimes I go into rooms and talk about it, and people are like, "Ooh," because they've heard about it already. So good. I'm glad you haven't. Basically, they did this 2-year comprehensive study to say, what makes people really, really effective, and particularly they work in a lot of teams at Google. They're innovating on things and doing things. And regardless of what you feel about, if they've diminished your SEO rankings or whatever, like they have to us, and you're mad at them right now, that's fine. But one thing they are really, really good at is building teams, and that's because they've studied it. So they found that there were 5 things. So one was psychological safety. 2 is dependability, which another word that you could use there to describe what they're talking about is accountability. So having people who are gonna, take something on, understand the assignment, get it done. 3 is structure and clarity. 4 is meaning. So understanding why you're doing, what it connects to, feeling like you have a greater sense of purpose, like you're actually making the world better, that why thing that I talked about. And then impact, so that, if you're just doing things and you don't really know why or what it connects to or what the outcomes are, it's gonna be pretty hard to feel excited about it. That's why sometimes we just like to take a pause and do the dishes, because when the sink's empty, it's empty, right? And we all need those kinds of things in our lives where there's measurable results, like we do something and then it's done and then it's great. So understanding and influencing group norms were the key to improving their teams. So one of the most surprising outcomes was they had some teams that were just like composed of the best, the brightest, the best resumes, the most credentialed people. But if those teams weren't set up in a particular structure, those people did less well than others at Google who were maybe, more middle of the road in terms of their skills and things like that. But they were in a team environment that made sense. So there's 2 important group behaviors. So this is for everybody, whether you're aspiring to C-suite, whether you just want to be on a high-performing team, whether you just want to improve your performance. So that's equality and distribution of conversational turn-taking, which basically that means everybody should have an equal amount of time expressing their opinion. And high average social sensitivity, meaning, upward on the empath or emotional IQ scale. So what does the conversational turn-taking mean to you? If you're like me, it means shut up, right? Because that gives other people a place to have room to speak. And I will often go last because, understanding that I have power in a room and things like that, there's nothing that shuts things down besides a boss that's like, I'm passionate about this. And then everybody's like, yeah, okay. Let's go do that then, because that's what she wants. So you have to understand, are you a person who needs to step forward, or do you need to actually step back and create room? And I think when you're initially in the phases of a project, you don't necessarily want to, go around the table like a kindergarten teacher and call on everybody every time. But eventually we get to that point, because part of really the group dynamic is for everyone's voice to be represented. And there are different ways of doing this. It doesn't literally have to be out loud, right? You could do this in a Slack room even, or, there's other ways of kind of connecting and sharing ideas, but ultimately everybody needs to have that equal space, or there isn't clarity because everyone hasn't expressed their opinion. And then we have to be sensitive to how what we're doing is landing on others. So like if you're all falling asleep right now, right, then I probably need to talk even louder. But no, really, for the group members to care about and to really, try to make sure that they're attentive to each other's feelings while still being authentic about their point of view. I mean, that doesn't sound so complicated, right? It's like, let's talk it out and let's care about each other as people and make sure that what we've said lands, because a lot of communication is, frankly, we're misunderstood, right? We forget 90% of what we've heard after we've heard it. So in this spirit then, I asked my award-winning, amazing, incredible marketing team to do a few things. Well, this is Backstage Pass, right? So I said, why don't you share with me, it doesn't have to be your favorite artist necessarily, but an artist that you think represents who you are at work. And then a song that exemplifies that, and then tell me why that is. So going through these team members, we've got Justin Turner, who picked Doja Cat, which I have a particularly affinity for this choice because I play trivia. And we have this little thing on my trivia team where if we don't know who a performer is when we get to the music round or whatever, we just put Doja Cat, even though it's probably not, right? It could be some 70s rock anthem we don't know, although, come on, be real, do I not know a 70s rock anthem? I probably do, but anyway, we just say Doja Cat. So anyways, I was pleased someone chose her. And the song is Paint the Town Red. And so he likes it because it samples a classic. And so he believes that anything in life can be referenced, built upon, and celebrated with what came before. So it's like let's not lose our history, let's not lose a sense of where we came from, but then let's also challenge the status quo, right? So what can we do or build on top of what's already there? And then how in the process of doing that do you dismiss your critics and assert your most authentic self? So can't let all the things in life get to your head, and sometimes you just have to paint the town red. So also Sabrina, a little bit more loquacious than Justin. She picked Meghan Trainor and mom. So again, in the sense that everybody has full lives, right? And so she's taking the lessons that she's learned or that she exhibits in her life as a mother and bringing those into the workplace. And she appreciates Meghan because she unapologetically loves herself just the way she is. Being a mom is the most important job to her. And previous to joining our company, her kids saw her miserable at a job she hated. And she had to show them that you don't have to settle and you need to know your worth and you need to stand up for that, in your workplace, in your team environment. And she's thriving. She's been recently promoted to director, which is fabulous. And her favorite lyric in the song is, "She taught me to love myself." And so referencing kind of what we heard from the last presenter, Matt, her kids help her to be a better person, right? So then she's able to turn that around and offer that back at work. And love is till the end, which, by the way, I haven't said this yet, so I'm going to say it now. Love has every place in business. So a lot of times we think about the work container as being more sterile and appropriate in this way, right? And so part of the reason, honestly, why I dress up is not just because I enjoy it and it's a little bit of a shtick when I'm doing speaking, and that's fine, but also because I want to make space for you if you feel like you're a little bit of an outsider, right? If you feel like there's a place where you can't open up or express yourself or you won't be successful, I want to tell you you can. And I want to be weird so that you know that you can be your full authentic self. And that is also what Sabrina brings to the table. So, and then our beautiful Sheila here chose Katy Perry. And as she shared earlier, every so often, she really feels like it's time to accelerate, and she gets that spark. And it's up to her to do that. And so, she does what she wants to do despite what other people think of her. Also, she is a great one for a costume too, just saying. And so, she wore 100 wigs at a concert, and she just kind of gave a middle finger to her critics, right? And so sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you can bring people along, and other times, and especially this is true, I read an article recently about dissenters and sort of what they experience in the workplace. So if you're that dissenting voice, right, so people will want you to come along, they will want you to be the same. We really love homogeny. I mean, when was the last time you got offended over something stupid? Like you're like, oh, I love this TV show, and somebody's like, oh, I don't really like that. And you were like mortally wounded, Or same thing about music, or some of the things that actually, when you think about it, who cares if you like that or didn't like that or whatever. Like my brother-in-law and I got in a very, very passionate, ridiculous argument about whether basketball is a more fun game or a less fun game post Steph Curry. Because it's a demonstrable fact that people now, after viewing him, because he's like so good at the game and so good at the three-point shot, that there are 70% more three-point shots taken since his sort of debut as a three-point shooter than there used to be. And so everybody's out past the curve trying to make three-pointers, when in fact some people would be better off sort of inside, like going for the 2-point shots or the dunks or whatever, right? So, but everybody's trying to be like Steph. But I think it's exciting because they miss more often and then wild things happen, and I like the chaos, and he thinks it's ruined the game. And he got literally offended with me and stalked out of the room at some point, and it's back and forth. Also, I lived in the Bay Area for 20 years, so I am a Warriors fan first and a Nuggets fan second, so that probably didn't help. But we get into these arguments about the stupidest things. And so, let's think about how we can be very giving as well and give time and efforts to be a champion for communities and causes. That's what you're all doing here, is you're giving time. So hopefully you're also receiving something back for your time, right? But you've agreed to be a community and to participate in a community, and that's a big deal. And then, like many artists, she has cycles, and Sheila feels the same way about it, right? So there's times where you're just kind of hunkered down trying to make your way through things. And that's going to be life for you as well. And then there's other times when you're ready for your comeback moment, so to speak. Okay, so then we go to Bryson, who picked a performer I hadn't heard of before. So this is the fun part, right? This is where it gets juicy, right? So people picking things you've never heard of, and this is fun. It's a remix of Come Sail Away. And this artist has a really imposing stature, but is actually like a gigantic clown, and just an incredible voice and talent. And so, you know, Bryson invites people to remember that there's more to people than what you perceive at face value, always. No matter how giving, open, transparent they are, everybody has layers. And he strives in his daily life to be a consistent and positive force that Puddles is. And, you know, the music reminds him to do that. And I would say he's not striving to do that, he is doing that. He's one of the most positive people that I know. And then we've got Nav, and she picked Love Song. And what resonates most with her is how Sarah stands her ground and doesn't conform to norms. So you're hearing that a lot from my team, and there's a reason for that, because we like outliers, right? And when you've got a whole team of those, I'm not saying that it's not a challenge. So a lot of people give up on DEIA initiatives because it's easier to deal with homogeny, precisely for the reason I just told you. Like when I got in that argument with my brother-in-law, it's easier to deal with things if they all feel the same, and everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction all the time, and no one's like, stop, wait, are we going even the right direction? Let's take our oars out of the water, let's figure it out. If nobody's doing that, then you go someplace fast, right? And it's easy, and it feels synchronized, and everything's good. And then as a leader, all you have to do is like those guys on those boats in the old days, you just have to go row, 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 right? It's easy. It's also boring, by the way, right? So it takes a lot more effort to synthesize lots of different opinions, ways of being. You know, there's conflict, there's hurt feelings at times, there's, you know, voices that are squelched or ones that come forward. No matter how hard you try, you're going to screw it up. Somebody's always going to say, hey, I didn't like that. You know, 9 out of 10 will love it, 1 won't, or whatever. And so you're never going to get to the point in your leadership journey where you just do everything right and everyone loves you and all is well. That's not going to happen. And so you might crave that as a human being though, right? So we do kind of crave that acceptance, and we crave those moments where like no one's upset with us and there isn't any emotional difficulty and everything is good. One of my primary anxieties is I don't like to disappoint people. So if I feel like I'm doing that, it gnaws at me. It's really, really hard for me. But as leaders, we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that means weathering that, because the outcome, the beautiful, beautiful outcome of that is that your business will be so much better than if you're all just kind of synchronized and doing the same thing at the same time. And so, and Nav also feels that Sarah fights for what she believes in and follows her heart. She doesn't chase the limelight, but chases her dreams instead. And that's a very Nav thing to say. She's a quiet force, a quiet personality. She questions society, what it tells her to do, and that's a constant battle that Nav feels she's fighting. She doesn't want to live a life society wants her to live. She wants to live a life that feels fulfilled. And look, if we're not looking at work as a source of that fulfillment, we're not looking in the right place, because you spend way too much time at work to dislike what you do, or to have it, you know, persistently or perpetually be a problem in your life. And that is more important. That's more important than salary. That's more important than title. That's more important than anything, is finding a place where, you know, 80% of the time you're good, and the other 20% of the time you're still willing to fight for it. And then, you know, Nav is a questioner, like what's normal, what's acceptable, what could we do differently? So Jacob picked David Bowie, awesome, one of my faves. I also have a David Bowie costume. I debated, but and he's amazed by David Bowie's ability to reinvent himself, and his career was a series of transformations, evolving across musical styles and personas. And that's the thing, is that we can evolve over time, and we can decide this is what's required for us now. And anytime, if you get promoted, you move laterally into a new role, you started a new company, you're just on a different project team doing a different project. What we often think is, I'm just going to pop up, This is what was successful at my last place. This will be fine. And I'm going to just do that because I've been rewarded for it in the past, so why not? And actually, that's a moment when we should be evaluating who's on the team, what are the unwritten rules of this team, how do I show up, how do I connect with the different members of the team, what's required of me now. And it sometimes takes dismantling who we were or what we were before. So who has done a DISC assessment before in this room? Okay, quite a few people. So the letters each stand for different things, and I'm an I, intuitive, which means, you know, I'm concerned about people and systems and things like that. And I'm also a very high D for dominant. So that's my natural style. When you look at my adaptive style these days, the I is even higher than my organic I, because it's a strength that I've decided to lean into. And my D is way suppressed. And I do that because if I exert dominance, like I told you, from where I sit with this, you know, with the power structure that we have, then I'm not creating room for other people. And so I encourage you to do like what Jacob recommends and think about, you know, you all have different capacities and capabilities. It's not about being inauthentic. It's what needs to come to the front today. And change is an opportunity for growth rather than something to fear. And Jacob is finding his quote unquote sea legs, speaking of boat metaphors, the confidence to open up, try new things, share ideas boldly, face the strange. I mean, look, he's sitting across from me in a Zoom meeting, so that speaks for itself. And he works, you know, he feels he works in a supportive environment that helped to encourage this change. The journey reminds him that we're not fixed to one path or identity, and we can continually evolve and redefine our futures. And then we've got LV, and she put, and I hope I get this right, Tameva, and it's the oldest Tahitian dance troupe and the sister group of the dance company that she's a part of. So again, people live full lives. Coco, who is the late mentor, created that band in the 60s and wrote the song No Hey Am I, and he dedicated his life to the preservation of culture. So the song is about a voice that can be heard, but despite searching for where it's coming from, they don't see anybody there. It continues to get louder, it's filled with love and connection, and then it eventually goes away, leaving peace in the soul. So she really feels like she's the living culmination of the love and experience and sacrifices of her mother, her grandmother, and all of her ancestors, and she works to embody that. She's also an activist, and so she's on the quieter side, but she lives her life with fire, which is really amazing to watch, and it's been wonderful to see her open up and blossom. No history, no self. No history, no self. And then our director of the team is Jamie Davis, and she picked Mary J. Blige, which was sort of not a surprise because that is her answer for everything. So one Christmas I got Mary J. Blige at one point came out with like a cosmetics line, and I kind of just, I was like, okay, check. She's like, oh, I didn't know she had a perfume and a lip gloss, and I'm like, yep, now you have all of it. She picked My Life because Mary has never forgotten who she was and has always stayed true to herself. She sings with her heart and soul with passion and fire, and she believes, of course she believes, that Mary J. Blige is underrated. And she might be considered what's rough around the edges, but that's what makes her special, is she's never lost that authentic self, that street side to her personality. And she can pierce your soul with her lyrics, performances, and life experiences. And, you know, Jamie, as a woman of color, has had to deal with that a lot. People feeling like she's too aggressive, or, you know, but she's not saying things in a friendly enough way so that people feel like, you know, things are coming across, when actually she's one of the most loving, nurturing people I've ever met in my life. But we automatically come into things with preconceived notions. Now, I will say of all the people on the list, I know Jamie the best. We've been working together on and off for over 20 years. So anywhere I go, if there's something she wants to do there, I'm like, let's go do this. So we're kind of partnered in that way, and it's been really a lot of fun. Whoops. So I don't want to. There is a playlist. So it has all of these songs on it. It has my song on it, which I chose Dolly Parton, and I chose World on Fire because I am on fire to make the world a different place. And I feel like if we all do what we're called to do or compelled to do from where we sit, then the world will be different. And that could be something small, it could be something local, it could be something international. It doesn't matter what it is, it just matters that we do something. And then I added in other songs that I think kind of speak to some of the themes here. It is a chaotic, eclectic, messy playlist, and I think it's badass. Everything from like super hard metal to country to folk, it's awesome. So I encourage you to do it, and then it's called Backstage Pass. That's my team on Spotify. If for some reason you can't get the QR code to work, or you can email me at any point, Kathleen@repairpal.com. I'll shoot it over to you. So the real sea level, right? Like we grade diamonds on the basis of C's. So what does the real sea level really look like, and how do you get there, and what do you need to work toward? And we've talked about some of these themes already. So creating clarity, collaboration, conflict, compassionate accountability, courage, and connection. There are other C's too that I could think of. Community, right? There's a lot, culture. There are a lot of them. I don't know why it comes back to C words, but it does. Okay? So this is a book that I recommend by Mark Lesser called Finding Clarity. And clarity, one of the most important things to know about it is that people really think that clarity is a clear set of instructions. Like the how to connect your VCR type instructions or whatever, right? Like if you, not IKEA, because those are practically unintelligible, right? But like a really clear set of instructions, and that is part of it. But the other part of clarity is understanding what everybody thinks, feels, or how they're receiving information in the room. And if as a leader you don't do that, if all you do is say, hey, here's where we're going, here's the change, here's the path that we need to be on, let's go, and we don't spend time exploring where the dissent is, or where the other voices are, or how people feel about it, or how they're receiving it, or even what they've understood, we haven't created clarity. We've just given a set of instructions, and there's a big difference. So anybody can create clarity from wherever they sit. And this is an allyship behavior as well. So, you know, if I'm sitting in a room and I notice that, you know, Jacob's not saying something, then it's up to me, right? Whether Jacob's my employee or not or what. But it's up to me to say, hey, before we move on, I'm curious what Jacob thinks, right? So you can call someone in to offer their perspective or opinion or whatever, and make sure that voices are represented. The other thing that you can do is, you know, sometimes we don't even invite the right people to the table to have an opinion. So another part of clarity is making sure you've got the right people around the table. So early on in my career, I was accused of over-communicating, right? So I think what this meant was that I was sending long emails, and my boss preferred emails that were 1 or 2 lines. There's no such thing as over-communication. That's a bullshit thing. That doesn't exist. So we look around the table, we see who's not represented. Let's try to make sure we either figure out what their opinions are and we help to stand for those opinions, or that we gather them and we pull them together. Because we are better together. And it took me a long time. So in the very first part of my career where I was building up, you know, my kind of leadership GPS or whatever, I would kind of lone wolf things. I can get stuff done fast. You know, I'm pretty productive. My output's pretty high, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not nearly as fast as I used to be, but you know, back in the day, nobody could churn stuff out faster than I could. So I thought, well, why should I ask, you know, 5 people for their opinion when I already know what I'm going to do and all of this other kind of stuff? Like, why would I bother to do that? They're just going to disagree with me, and it's going to take more time and all that. And so year after year after year, I would get pretty high marks on my reviews, some outstanding stellar reviews. I would win an award here or there for directors, whatever, or got a couple patents and trademarks when I was working at Intuit. Felt really good about, you know, all this stuff that I was producing. But every year I got low marks in collaboration because I would leave people by the wayside, right? And they would feel like they were left in the dust. And me being me, and I'm just gonna own this, I was like, well, if you can't keep up with me, that's your problem, you know? So I'm out here, you know, running this marathon, you know, theoretically or whatever, and I'm not keeping accountable for what that means of bringing the team along. When I got to a certain level of leadership, that became a real problem. And so that's when I really had to take a hard look at, you know, why is this important, or why is gathering these perspectives important, or how can we pull things together? It's just like getting my annual review, right? I get input from my boss every single year. He finds something that I'm doing well and things that I'm not doing well, because that's what a review is. It's not just this glowing thing, oh, you're perfect. It's never going to be that. But then I'm free to take on whatever I want to take on and to leave off whatever I want to leave off. And that's true not just of the praise, because there's that, but also of the, criticism, or what I like to call suggestive feedback, because that's what it is. It's just suggestions, right? So if you don't over-identify when people kind of rub you on the back, and you don't over-identify with whatever people are suggesting to you, and you can stand back and objectively evaluate it, then you can synthesize the two. And ultimately, you need that on every single thing that you do in business. I feel like one of the problems with most C-suites is that they're too opaque. They don't take the time to bring the employees in. They sit in a room, they decide what to do, and then they superimpose that on their organizations. That's a BS thing. That's not good leadership. So one of the things that I want to, now stand for, because I am passionate about it, is making sure that we include as many people in the room at the table, part of the project, as possible. And yes, that slows us down at times, but what it produces actually is speed over time. And now that people are running like 5-minute miles in marathons, we can no longer say it's a marathon and not a sprint, because people are sprinting marathons, but you know what I mean. All right, so I'm gonna read you a little poem. I love to read poems. Almost every time I do a talk, I read a poem. So this is a short one. It's First Grade by William Stafford. In the play, Amy didn't want to be anybody, so she managed the curtain. Sharon wanted to be Amy, but Sam wouldn't let anybody be anybody else. He said it was wrong. All right, Steve said, I'll be me, but I don't like it. So Amy was Amy, and we didn't have the play, and Sharon cried. So why am I sharing this with you? Because sometimes work feels like first grade, right? We all want to do things. We kind of have different ideas. Then some loud voice is like, nope, that's not the right thing to do. We all capitulate, but we don't feel great about it. And then that's that. And we don't have the play, and we don't, ultimately execute to the best of our ability, and that's it. And so a lot of what happens around consensus building is not consensus at all. It's actually just capitulation, and we're just capitulating to whoever has the most power in the room, or the loudest voice, or the person that seems the most authoritative, or whatever. So what we want to do then, and I've been speaking about collaboration a lot, but I want to point out that collaboration isn't just this sort of kumbaya or around a campfire having s'mores moment, right? We might get there eventually. We might never get there. It involves a conflict. And we are conflicting in a healthy way if I can state what your position is and you can state what my position is, and we fully understood and we agree that the other person understands what our position is. So if we can kind of do that as a group, and we can surface all that, and we can put all of that on the table, and we can discuss what's important and what's not, then we can sift through it. It's still my job as a leader to say, I understand that you don't want to do this, or I understand that you're uncomfortable and we're still going to go this direction. It's still my job to do that sometimes, but I do that with all of that on board, and that sometimes changes the approach to how we handle things. And then there's compassionate accountability. So creating accountability systems is super important for teams. Otherwise, you're just sitting around talking and feeling good about yourself and all that with your collaboration and your good conflict skills, and everybody's fully expressed, and that's great. But ultimately, we also need to be accountable for what we're about to produce. But we can't do that in a vacuum where it's just, a checklist. And then we either did it or we didn't. So how that shows up is that first we have a vision, like we've got to have some greater meaning, something we're working toward. And then we all have clear commitments like, yes, this is mine, I got it, and I'm going to do the following things. We have to have honest and ethical conduct, which always also means that we're accountable to speaking up when we see that something's wrong, or that we don't agree with what's going on, or it doesn't seem like it's working the way it's intended. We don't just brush by that. We have an obligation to bring that forward. And then, we breathe first. So where we start feeling that anxiety, right? And this is the mindfulness teacher coming out. Breathe first, and then we act, and then we live, because we're human, right? And so we express our values. And then the compassion part is we need to be aware of others' feelings in this process. We want to always aspire to greater understanding, and there's no more important thing to do as a leader than to try to understand other people. And then we have to have some motivation to help and to heal. We're all human and we all cause harm. So whether you mean to or not or what, you will cause harm in this lifetime. You've caused some already and you will continue to do it no matter what your best intentions are or what have you. That's just part of it. And so we have to live with that and we have to work with that. And then we need to have courage, and people talk about this a lot in a business context, but most of us aren't like climbing up to a third-story window and grabbing infants out of a burning building, right? So our lives aren't literally on the line necessarily, although our nervous system doesn't always know that, right? So professional anxiety is a very real thing, but what does courage look like? So courage shows up when we set the table. That's what Sheila did earlier in her speech when she said to you, hey, I'm feeling this way. That's setting the table. There's research that has been done that if you are speaking to, say, an English-speaking audience and you have a very heavy accent because English isn't your native language, the people will understand you better if you just simply say to them, hey, I'm going to try to speak slowly. I've got a heavy accent. If at any point you don't understand me, let me know. Now, it's not like people won't notice that you have an accent. They'll notice it. But if you tell them, and you tell them they're going to have to listen to you more carefully, it's a mind switch. Then they're ready for you. I sometimes coach people who are neurodivergent to show up in interviews, and I encourage them to share to the extent practical sort of what their differences are. Maybe they can't look people in the eyes, and someone's going to be freaked out by that in an interview process, right? So you tell them, right? Hey, I'm neurodivergent, I'm not really able to make eye contact, but boy, I'd be really great at this job, and I'm excited to tell you why. People will immediately forgive you for it. We're all sweeter than we think we are. Right? And other people are sweeter than you think they are. I've already spoke about this. Don't avoid conflict. Be willing to say no and be willing to have difficult conversations. Leadership is uncomfortable. It shouldn't be painful, right? So the difference is, like, for anybody who works out, it's like working out. My muscles hurt all the time. Like right now, standing here, I'm like, ooh, I'm a little tight right here, you know, right? Like my muscles are always sore because I'm pushing to the next level of my fitness journey. But there's a difference between sore and the kind of pain that causes an injury. And that's what you've got to sort out. So leadership is uncomfortable. It shouldn't be painful. Showing up on a team is sometimes uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be painful. Be real, be vulnerable, be willing to take a stance, and be more realistic about your competence. So again, like if you're hiding behind, oh, I got it, I can do everything because you're trying to impress someone or whatever. I think being realistic, especially the more senior you get, being realistic about what you're good at and what you're not good at is really, really important. So you can depend more on others. You can make clear requests and collaborate as a way of still owning the outcomes, but without doing everything yourself. A lot of people don't get this. So sometimes, and maybe people don't love hearing this, I don't know, but sometimes I'm like, hey, you know, maybe this isn't your thing. You're not good at that. So-and-so over there is great at it. Go get them to help you with this and then bring it back to me. Right? I don't need you to do everything yourself to be all, end all, know all. That's why we're working on a team. Be aware of busyness as a way of avoiding stress and anxiety. Sometimes we just load up our plates and do all of this stuff because we're avoiding something difficult. So wherever we're feeling that discomfort, right? Wherever you feel that in your body, when you feel that sensation, that's telling you there's something to pay attention to there, that there's a lesson for you there. And so if you create a little bit of space and you just kind of sit in that discomfort, your decisions will come a little more easily. You'll be able to be a little bit more expressed and see what happens. And then ultimately, you know, no matter where we are on the how fast we trust spectrum, we do have to believe in each other. We have to decide we're going to commit to each other, we're going to invest, and that people who have differences or differences of opinion, it's not personal, it's beautiful. And that doesn't actually compromise you or your boundaries at all. And if for some reason the way someone's expressing it does in fact compromise your boundaries, then you know you've got to say, hey, I've got this, and you're actually in the painful zone and not in the uncomfortable zone with me right now, and that's not okay, right? So, and then where things do and don't work for you, just handle that with integrity and without gossip. You know, a lot of people say, I just need to vent. Who here thinks like just venting is an effective strategy? Yeah, it's really not. It doesn't actually make you feel better. what makes you feel better is something that is, sort of more actionable or gets to the root of the problem or how you're actually feeling or whatever. But just spraying this stuff all over everyone, then it takes on a life of its own. Your problems actually get worse when you do that. And sometimes I will indulgently engage in this, particularly around family things, right? I'll sort of, oh my gosh, my sister's the worst, she's doing this, right? And I will do that, and I'll sit in that for a while, and then I'll be like, wow, I've made this so much bigger than it was before. And I like to tell a good story, right? So it starts getting bigger and bigger, and that fish just grows, right? And it's the most giant fish anybody's ever pulled out of a pond, my problem, by the time I'm done venting about it. All right, so connection is super important. I wouldn't be where I am without my connections. So for those of you who don't know, I do a lot of work with partners and partner business. So it just so happens to be my job to essentially make friends with people. I mean, how rad is that job? When I was a little kid, I would think often I wanted to be a writer because I do love books. But the other thing people would ask me is what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, if I could just kind of be like Socrates, like if I could just run around, say smart shit, and like make friends, like that would be a really cool job. With some pluses or minuses, I sort of have that job. How cool is that? And then it comes back to you. So how does it come back to you? You have to care for yourself in this process, no matter where you're at in this leadership journey. It's up to you to care for yourself. You heard this with the last speaker as well. He talked about this. He talked about realizing that he wasn't as healthy, and so therefore he wasn't showing up the way he wanted to show up. I too had that epiphany for a totally different reason in 2020. And a lot of people say, well, I don't know how you find the motivation, Kathleen. I don't. I'm not motivated to go work out 9 days out of 10. There'll always be one day where for some reason I just wake up and I've got like orange juice in my veins or something like that. And I'm like, let's go, right? But for the most part, I'm not motivated. I have just made it mandatory because self-care is mandatory. And I was 45 years old before I understood what self-care was. I thought it was like bubble baths and massages, right? Which are lovely. I love both of those things. But it is really about having the discipline to sort of parent yourself. So getting the right amount of exercise, eating the right things, putting yourself to bed, getting the right amount of sleep. Sleep is so important to health. It's probably the most important thing. This probably goes like sleep, exercise, food, or something like that. And we think, oh, if I burn the midnight oil and I do all of this work and and I'm staying up and my boss is gonna think I'm so, and there are cultures like that, like hustle cultures like that, right? But actually, I would much rather have somebody sleep. And there's times when it's just really important for you to do that. It's also pretty hard because sometimes it's elusive and you can't totally control it. But if you pull all of your other self-care stuff together, it comes together. So I do these challenges every year. I'm doing 2024 miles in 2024. So running is one way. I mentioned I do nonprofit stuff, but then as part of that, so I was in Kenya a few weeks ago with a nonprofit African library project. I'm actually the liaison to Ghana, but also just a general volunteer with the organization. And then on the end of that, of course, I tacked on a 3-day safari with a balloon ride, as one does, because you're in Kenya. And I mentioned that I meditate, so that's a really important part of my self-care routine. So what's your self-care routine? If I were to ask you, do you have one? How many of you would say yes? So you're not making yourselves mandatory. So if you take nothing away from this, like everybody says, right? We're getting close to the ending point here. It's mandatory to your career journey and to who you are as a leader, a participant, whatever your role is. So in that spirit of connection, please connect with me. This is my link tree. I turned it into a cup of coffee because I do a podcast called Coffee with Kathleen. I would love it if you joined me there as well. But you can get connected to all the things from my link tree. So with that, are there any questions, anything else I can talk to you about? Would you like me to sing a cappella? You don't want that? Yeah, I could do that. It probably wouldn't be cute. But actually, when I came down in the elevator, when I was coming down here, a guy says, oh, are you going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I said, no, I'm at a conference. I'm about to deliver a talk. He was like, oh. He's like, a music conference? I'm like, no. He's like, I kind of want to go to this conference. I'm like, yeah, well, are you a marketer in automotive? Because if not, You can't come. Anything? All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much.